Hello again. When we left off reading Avatar, 3 Jem'Hadar ships had just come through the wormhole. Station was not ready, so let's jump right into Chapter 4. And considering all of that, do you think it could increase the energy dissipation effectiveness of the hull plating in the event of shield envelope disruption? Are you excited yet? Ezri sighed, wondering if she could just pretend to be asleep. Probably not. She was on her back beneath the flight control console. But Nog could see her face if he turned around, and she had encouraged him into conversation. Next time, I'll be sure to suggest a topic, nothing so vague as, "What's on your mind, Nog?" "Honestly, I'm not sure," she said, reaching up into the Odian bundle that swayed above her face and twisting 2 of the wire patches together. Ensign Tenmei would have to integrate them. She had the fiber torch, but she was below, working on the pulse phaser assemblies. It would have to wait. No, don't wait. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what an Odian is supposed to do. Technobabble. It sounds good to me, Nog, but that's really not saying much. The problem was that Tokendax, her second host, had been a theoretical engineer 2 centuries ago. Not only were the memories hazy, technology had progressed more than a few running steps past Tobin's experience. And yet, as often as Ezri had told Nog that, he continued to ask questions and run his every idea past her, delivering each as enthusiastically as possible, the salesman in him shining through. I can see it. As if she was actually an engineer, or possessed Jadzia's natural ability toward technical problem solving. Even with all of the symbionts' experiences to draw upon, she wasn't going to win any physics awards. "But you think it'll work?" he asked, turning around to look at her. His sharpened teeth bared in a sincere grin. "You don't see a problem with the numbers, do you?" "Be patient. He's under a lot of pressure." Despite assurances to the contrary, Nog seemed to insist on holding himself personally responsible for how slowly things were going. Technically, he had taken over Miles O'Brien's job. And while there were certainly more experienced engineers in Starfleet, none of them knew the station as Nog did, and no other engineer had received his form of field training on both DS9 and the Defiant. He was still terrible at the administrative aspect, often relying on Kira or Jas to deal with master reports to Starfleet, and he didn't have the easy self-assurance about his ideas or work that the chief had, but he was determined, talented, and extremely eager. "No, I don't see a problem with the numbers," Ezri said truthfully. She'd already forgotten the numbers. "I think you should write it up and meet with Kira about it, but if I were you, I'd wait a few days." Nog turned back to the bridge's less-than-whole engineering station, nodding. "You're right, and that would give me a chance to iron out the details. I still haven't calculated the density of the subsequent particle cloud, which could interfere with shield harmonics." She listened with half an ear, her wandering thoughts moving back to Kira. Ezri wasn't one to push counseling, but she thought it'd be a good idea to seek the colonel out later, to at least make herself available. Even with half the communication systems on the station operating sporadically at best, word had gotten around about the murder. Although she supposed not many knew that Kira had been a friend of the murdered Prylar. Julian had told her that. And so soon after losing Odo, it's not fair. Kira projected a comfortable understanding of Odo's choice to return to the Great Link, but Ezri suspected that it still hurt her. No kidding. And having to deal with the murder of a childhood friend would reinforce conscious and subconscious stresses of abandonment. That was a psychological standard anyway. Ezri had been acting as station counselor for long enough to know that emotional reactions weren't exactly set in titanium. I hope she'll talk to someone about it, though, before she has time to bury the pain. She would have gone to see Kira already, except for the incredible workload that practically everyone on the station occupied. As disheartening as it was, Kira undoubtedly needed Dax's engineering skills more than her ability to listen. The original plan, pushed for by the Federation and Bajor, had seemed feasible enough. take it all apart with the Aldebaran keeping watch, refurbish the Defiance tactical systems and armor, rewire communications and most of the subspace station systems for the station, and put it all back together again in one short and brutal push. An updated Defiant, but more importantly, no more endlessly overlapping maintenance shutdowns for the station, no more makeshift patches between Cardassian and Federation technology that only seemed to last until it was really important for them to work. And if 90% of the SCE techs weren't off repairing war damage, we would have gotten away with it too. It's meddling kids. They just didn't have the staff they needed to get everything done in a reasonable amount of time. Nog's comm badge chirped, and he sat up a little straighter as he answered, drawing Ezri's attention. The obvious pride he took in his position was good to see. They'd all suffered in the war, and deserved a little happiness. And the strangest thing happened. She was still on her back and was looking up at Nog. And the change that came over him, over his upside-down face, a flash of pure panic that started in his eyes and seemed to spread, contorting his rounded features, had her believing, just for a second, that he was having some kind of convulsion. Nog, what is it? He couldn't seem to catch his breath. He stood and stumbled to communications, running his hands over the console, and as she squirmed out from beneath the flight controls, Shar's voice spilled out into the bridge. It's on her way, but power up now. I repeat, the station has gone to red alert. We need the Defiance interface online and a full status report. Commander Jest is beaming over, but the colonel says to get ready immediately. Attack ships they're firing on the Aldebaran. Nog looked positively ill. He ran back to where he'd been working and started digging frantically through his tools, calling for the computer to assess the Defiant's current condition. There was a sudden flurry of movement behind them as the three other techs on the bridge rushed to various unpaneled consoles and started powering things up. Inline impulse control operating at 42%. Secondary subsystems for engineering interface, reaction control, science control, and torpedo launchers inoperative. Primary subsystems 4. As the computer's calm voice continued to list all that was wrong with DS9's best defense, as only a handful of engineers raced to put it back together again, Ezri was suddenly quite sure that people were going to die. She tapped the flight control interface and scanned the numbers, Nog yelling for an interphasic coil spanner over the computer's growing index of problems. Maybe a lot of us. It happened faster than Shar would have thought possible. Only minutes ago, he'd been trying to stay awake, vaguely wishing for the warmth of his quarters. Now he stood at the central ops table amid flashing red lights, relaying orders to Nog and trying to activate the display screen at the same time. About to call for an engineering status on the shield emitters when the station's sensors registered a hit on the Aldebaran. Even as the ship's data flow fluctuated wildly, the screen that dominated ops spun to life, displaying the fierce battle. The trio of fighters were pulling away from their first run, flashes of brilliant light sparking from a series of shield deflections across the rapidly approaching Aldebaran's bow. The Nebula-class starship seemed slow and lumbering as the three Jem'Hadar peeled away and looped back, strafing the saucer's underbelly, their tactical choreography almost like hunting. A pack of vicious carnivores attacking some mammoth beast. All around Shar, techs were calling out instructions in low, tense voices, moving about purposefully and quickly, making room for the small crowd that erupted from the turbolift. Status reports started trickling in from all around the station, appearing on the table's master display. Shar ran a collation and fed it to Kira's office, channeling his body's elevated awareness and need for action. Stimulated by the situation, his antennae fairly throbbed with it into lending him greater speed. When he looked up next, he could only see two of the darting fighters, both twined back and forth in front of the Aldebaran, as if taunting it, narrowly dodging a series of phaser blasts, the energy streams dissipating harmlessly into the darkness. He tapped at the table's display, looking for the third ship, but there were problems with several of the station's short-range sensors. He could only get a partial read, a suggestion of functional energy behind the Aldebaran's starboard flank. And there was an explosion low on the ship's structure, a misty spray of light and escaping gases behind what could only be the Aldebaran's main engineering decks. The third fighter flew down and away. Goodness. Their shields are gone, someone behind him shouted, and a glance at the Aldebaran's interface confirmed it. A second later, the interface blanked out, but the station's sensors picked up evidence of the powerful blast, much more powerful than could have been caused by a Jem'Hadar striker's phased polaron beam. It was some type of quantum warhead, and even as Shar sent the newest data into command, Kira burst out of her office, a look of angry shock on her face. "We've lost contact with the Aldebaran. Tactical, can you get targeting for quantum torpedoes?" she called out, turning to face the main screen. All three of the ships were starting another run at the Aldebaran. The starship was turning, but slowly, much too slowly. Lieutenant Bowers was tapping frantically at his station's console. "Negative. Launcher sets 3, 4, and 7 are down, and the station's internal locks are unreliable on 5 and 6. Shar, establish communication with the Defiant and try to get our interface with the Aldebaran back, at least text," Kira said. "Mr. Wen, take your team and get to engineering. I want you and Tarek's crew on the shield emitters. If we can get the Aldebaran close enough to one of the docking pylons." But it was already too late. Even with the visual dampening, the cascade of light that flashed through ops from the main screen was blinding. Shar was suddenly too busy struggling to compensate the station through the shockwave to see it, but enough of the sensors were working to tell him the terrible, improbable truth, as hundreds upon thousands of pieces blew outward from where the starship Aldebaran had been. No. Oh no. That covers it. Just over 900 people on the Aldebaran, and Kira couldn't allow herself the luxury of disbelief or sorrow. It didn't matter that it shouldn't have happened, that an outgunned trio of tiny fighters shouldn't have had a chance. The ship was gone, and the second they finished dodging what was left of the Aldebaran, the Jem'Hadar would be back to run at the station. Their intent could be clearer, and her options were limited. Shar called out that the majority of the wreckage from the starship probably wouldn't affect the station, but she barely heard him, her thoughts racing to get ahead of what was happening. Shields practically non-existent, weapons arrays are out. If we could commandeer the dock ships. She rejected the idea immediately, remembering what was around. 4 freighters and a couple of survey ships, maybe a dozen personal craft, and even with the runabouts and the evac pods, they couldn't get a tenth of the population out before the attack. Think. Sam. Shar's usually melodic voice was strained and rough. "Sir, we're receiving a response to our priority distress call from the IKS. "How far away?" Kira interrupted, not caring who it was, hoping wildly. 22 minutes. In 22 minutes, it would be over. She'd seen the report that Nog had flashed, knew that the Defiance crew wouldn't have made it to the ship yet, and it didn't matter. They had no choice. She tapped her comm badge. "Oh, Sam. Things are gotten so bad." "Commander Jast," she said, silently hating Starfleet and herself for letting this happen, cursing the false security that they'd all been lulled into. "The Aldebaran has been destroyed. The Defiant is the station's best hope for defense. Are you ready?" Jast didn't hesitate. "We're ready." "Do what you can," Kira said, and with a silent prayer, she turned to watch the screen, men and women calling out numbers and names behind her as they fought to keep the station safe, as pieces of the Aldebaran began to hammer at their shields. A few seconds later, the Jem'Hadar started their first run at DS9. That's the end of Chapter 4. Oh my goodness. Sammy. Oh my goodness, that was very tense and very shocking. So when the action started, it really started. This got very serious very quickly. First we had 1 dead person, a murdered Prylar, and now we have over 900 dead people on a Starfleet ship. This is such bad news. So I guess we'll have to tune in next time for Chapter 5 and see what the Defiant and the station can do now that their fully operational guard ship has disappeared. It's been destroyed. So don't forget, Trek Book Club. It's a magnet on my pin. And see you next video.